Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. With me in the studio, as always, is the fabulous Mr. Eric J. Morin.
You know, the intro just keeps getting saucier. You know, it's just better and better, man. You're killing it.
I'm practicing my voiceover strategy there to see, you know, what I get the most on.
Right? Is that like your fallback? You can be like a radio DJ or even a announcer for some type of like game show or something.
I always thought it would be cool to be like one of the behind the scenes people that does like Pixar movies and stuff. You never actually see the actor, but you know them. You know the voice. That's what I go for. We had at the foundation, someone had mentioned that. It's like, I recognize the voice. And I was like, haha, that means I'm doing something right.
Oh, that's good. Oh, okay, good. Right. See. Now they need to go on YouTube, subscribe. Shameless plug. Go on YouTube, hit subscribe, watch the video. But you can watch the podcast in many different forms.
Yes, always
listen to. Yeah.
And I always send them when I speak with clients. I'm always like, be sure to watch it on YouTube too, because sometimes we put things across the bottom of the screen. I know the production quality that Reese puts together is amazing, and it's a lot more engaging. I feel like when you watch it via YouTube rather than just listening to it in the car. But I'm not naive. I know people love listening on the car ride into work. So whatever way, share the love. Get people to watch.
Don't watch it on the car ride into work. Please don't do that. Yeah.
Don't watch it. And then speaking about this last weekend, I think, we brought up a great conversation of, the limits people place on themselves. Ultimately speaking, when they hear the message that we put in the marketplace of, multi-locations, we have some people that are like, well, I'm not a multi-location. I don't want to, you only work with multi-locations. I wanted you to touch on that a little bit and explain, the reasoning behind what it is that we do in general.
Well, I would say for anyone listening, first of all, one of the greatest things you can do is just sit down and ask yourself a simple question, which is, what would it take for me to grow 10 times? Now, what I find is through my experience is 5 times is about as much as somebody wants to grow. And play that out for yourself, by the way. If you 10 times, you're like, we're doing 10 million, we want 100 million. I don't know if I need that, but 50 million sounds perfect. So it's interesting that 5 times it tends to be more of a doable number in my experience. However, now they can grow 10 times. We've grown plenty of people 10 times, but they don't see that. But I would ask yourself that, and here's the interesting part about that. And this original conversation came up because I was intrigued when someone shared this podcast with somebody, and then it's just really set on me that they were like, well, here's a podcast for you because you have multiple locations and I don't, so it's not for me. And then then I thought, isn't it interesting? There are books, and I've discussed it before on upper limit problems, which is what happens is that we as individuals, no matter where we are, no matter where our success falls, is that we put these fake ceilings on ourselves. And we do that unintentionally, subconsciously, whether it's relationship, whether it's business, whether it's finances. You'll see people who are in debt stay in debt. You'll see people who have poor relationships continue to have poor relationships. And a lot of it has to do with where comfort level lies. And comfort level lies with, so let me give you an example of what I mean by that. You're hanging out with all your dental friends. All your dental friends are doing $1.4 million. And believe it or not, there's actually a subconscious part in your head that says, if I was a $10 million practice, these friends would not want to be friends with me anymore. We would not have as much in common. We wouldn't be able to, complain about the same things. I would probably have to find new friends and new people to challenge me and new experiences. Now, you might say, well, okay, well, those are those people that are 1.4. I'm doing 10, so it's different. But it's not. It's actually the same. At $10 million, you do the exact same thing, because I truly believe that if you wanted to, you could get capital, you could make decisions, you can grow. Like, so if someone's listening to this podcast doing 1.4 million, you could flip a switch literally and they could be $10 million. It's not that hard. It's really, really, really not that hard. And so simple to go from 1.4 to 10 in dental. So then why would you not want to do that, right? Why would you turn it off? Why would you turn the conversation off? You would turn the conversation off, believe it or not, subconsciously, not consciously, because of the fact that you create this upper limit. And even you being, and I'll put that out even to a peer circle. You're at the country club, you're hanging out with your friends. All your friends are doing about the same. This is why the whole idea of like, right, your income is the 10 people closest to you.
Yeah.
Your net worth is the 10 people closest to you. And so now at the country club, you're doing 10 times as much as your friends. And now all of a sudden they're looking at you differently. Or now you think that now, by the way, you're like, well, I don't believe that. Watch what happens. There are upper limits. Some people call these self-imposed limitations, but a self-imposed limitation is a little bit different. A self-imposed limitation is a belief that you intentionally create, and you find things to back those up. And so you have a self-limiting belief about your education or your success level or what your practice can do, whatever those are. There's these self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
But there's another side of this that is a subconscious, right? That limiting factor, which is called a ceiling, where we put artificial ceilings in place that you can take your business 10 times. But we put the artificial ceilings in place. It's not just peer. I was just giving you an example of peer, but it could be, I don't want to change, go into the unknown. If you think about dentists by and large are conservative people. So now I have to get out of my comfort zone. I don't like change.
Yeah.
I would have to change, right? My team. I've been working with Susie for 30 years. That would make me uncomfortable. I would have to fill in the blank over and over and over and over again. Even with relationships, sometimes people will do this. They'll sabotage a relationship intentionally, believe it or not, keeping themselves from a certain level of happiness. And so while this sounds all, all about psychoanalyzing yourself or whatever.
I think people ultimately, we did a whole event on this at one point. This was like 4 or 5 years ago, where we talked about people putting themselves in a box. Ultimately, you are a dental practice that can only do what? You are just basically putting a label on yourself as this is what I'm going to be. And people, when they ask that, and even when I have conversations with people call in and they say, I might not be, the ideal fit for you because, and they're telling me this because I'm not multi-location. The reason why we love working with multiple locations because we can add a little bit more sophistication on what they're doing, but ultimately those are generally speaking the ones that are like hungry and motivated to go help a bunch of people. And that's why we're kind of attracted to the multi-location ordeal. It doesn't mean that a single location that is, very successful and kind of trying to figure out, all right, what do I do next? That we don't work with those. We work with lots of those clients. I think, people, they see a few things, and this is with anything in the entire world. They make up their mind before they even have a discussion, or they make up their mind before they even do a little bit of research on, the back end to figure out, well, is that true? Do I know that to be true? And if I don't, they don't do a lot of research on it. And I think, you made a great point about just people just kind of, especially in the dental world and medical professions in general, they label themselves as a doctor rather than a business owner. And before we got on this, and you did a great job of explaining this, the idea of entrepreneurs. So how we, ultimately want to work with entrepreneurs, not create them. And I think that's a better way to look at it rather than, am I multi-location? Can I work with you guys? I think those are like the key points that, most people miss when they start looking at research on how do I grow?
Well, I think that the entrepreneur thing, probably hit me 3 or 4 months ago. And you and I we've talked about this. I really had this, maybe I'm as an idealist, I truly, want everyone to naturally want to be an entrepreneur, but the truth is they're not. And, business is, I went to 4 years, undergrad in business, 2 years, master's in business. I've done 20 plus years in business. So there's a discipline in business, right? It is a true science, just like dentistry is a science. And so you're learning an entire new discipline. And what I don't want to do and spend the rest of my career doing is trying to take individuals who really truly have set such a strong upper limit that they refuse to get out of their own way and try to convince them to get out of their way, because that's a wasted effort, or let them see a psychologist. Because what I mean by that is, and I don't mean that in a harsh sense, I just mean that if somebody wants to get the job done, that's a fun person to work with. Like, imagine sitting down with a dental patient. So this is maybe a good way for you to look at it. If you sit down with a dental patient over and over again, and imagine them coming in once a month and telling you their tooth hurt, and you told them exactly what procedure you needed to do and exactly how to fix that. And the next month came around and they didn't schedule it. They didn't do anything about it. And then they complained about it the next month and the next month and the next month and the next month. And then they went to a new dentist because that dentist will solve their problems. And they do the same thing over and over and over again. Now, we call that person an associate because that's ultimately what they should have been, right? And there's nothing to be ashamed of that, by the way.
Yeah.
Dentistry is an amazing profession. It really is. And you help and serve a lot of people. And, you just have to know you're not an entrepreneur in that way. Yep. So I think what Tower Leadership is ideally suited for is the sophisticated client, the one who wants to be a entrepreneur, or is, I should say, an entrepreneur, and wants to take their business up. And that doesn't mean we're all on the same level of entrepreneurial spectrum. Like, some people are different than others, but here's the thing is that, will you do the work? And so I just find it interesting in the conversation, and bring it back for a minute, because I think you have to ask yourself, what are your own upper limit problems? You all listening to this, I have upper limit problems. Matthew has upper limit problems. Everyone has them, by the way. None of us don't have upper limit problems. We all have them. Okay. And so it's important for you to understand, listening to this podcast, what are my upper limit problems? What are my team's upper limit problems? What are we getting stuck in? And are the people surrounding me have so low upper limits that ultimately it's stopping the organization from growing? And I think these are things you have to analyze as an entrepreneur and say, do I have the right upper limits? Am I really pushing this organization? By the way, you say, well, Eric, but I don't want to grow anymore. No one said you didn't. I mean, I didn't say you need to grow. Maybe it's more people you can impact. Maybe it's more great people to bring into the organization. Maybe it's more of a legacy. I don't care about the idea that somebody would say that, hey, it's all about multiple location. I do think that dentistry, let me be very, very, very clear and fair about it. The independent solo dentist by themselves on the block is going to have a very, very, very difficult time competing in the next decade and beyond. You won't have economies of scale. You don't understand enough about business strategy to ultimately differentiate the way you do things. You're not going to be able to compete on price. You probably won't do the things. You're not
going to have the capital. I think ultimately speaking, when I look at it and I see when we talk about what the industry is going to look like, you're just not going to have the capital to compete.
Well, if I open up across the street, I will just swamp the patients and inundate them. There's a saying in business that he who can spend the most money to capture a new patient wins. Look, I would spend more money than you to capture those patients, and I would. No, Eric, you don't understand. They really love me. Don't be so sure. And so the thing about that, and like I said, this is just for you to take back to your own business and realize is that entrepreneurialism in dentistry, true entrepreneurialism, is here to stay. And we are seeing a consolidation of the industry, but I believe the independent dentist who really wants to build one hell of a group, who invest in their team, who invest in their operations, who invest in their strategy, who really are defined with their group, who know where they're going at, what they're going at, they're going to not only survive, but they're going to thrive. So yes, if a Dental Wealth podcast is focused on those individuals, yes, because those people need a home to go to. Those people need a home to go to say, look, I want to do awesome, amazing things. If not, they're going to do what these other people do, is they're going to take some silly offer that doesn't make sense from some DSO, and they're going to become employees. And so look, if you're going to do that, that's fine. Grow your valuation as much as possible, sell the thing off. if you're, but if you're ultimately trying to create a true dental organization, yeah, that's the idea of this podcast. But it's all idea for you too is creating a strong dental organization that is highly valuable, that is highly scalable, that is fun to be a part of, that impacts its own community. That as soon as I say that, by the way, someone says, we give away free dentistry some days. No, I'm talking about on a grander scale. I'm talking about truly impacting in so many ways. And so I don't mean to sound patronizing. I really don't, because I have my own upper limit problems too. Yeah. And we all have our own upper limit problems. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. But what I'm trying to do is challenge you for a moment to say, wherever you think you're at in the organization, then you can do so much more. And I would also challenge those individuals listening to this podcast who, maybe don't think that they can move to a large dental organization. That's not true. But there's also people who listen to the podcast at the same time who need to lean in more and need to lean in for more help and lean in more for more, structured advice, because, time does tick by pretty quick. I don't know about you, Matthew, but I'm want to get stuff done. I want to move, right? I want to move my business. I want to move my life. I want to I don't want to wait I don't want to spend an extra decade doing what I could have done in 4 years. I mean, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, not personally, but.
And I think, the idea of upper limits, if you're trying to think of yourself on, even on a personal side for your upper limits, I think, this isn't a financial evolution plug, but it is a plug. If you haven't read that yet, I mean, I think, if you're a listener, go read it, because it'll kind of show you where your upper limits are as far as like where you fall on your personal life. So I know in your book, Eric, you do a great job of explaining how people fall into, the 5 categories of, ultimately where their wealth is, and they put limits on themselves. And I think the reason why people don't progress in the levels is because they put themselves in a box. They put a limit on what they could get accomplished. And ultimately they surrounded themselves with organizations and people that would ultimately keep them at that level, instead of saying, all right, what do I need to do to get to the next one? Who do I need to get involved with? What resources can I utilize? What can I do to do this? I think the upper limit thing is, ultimately speaking, that's one of the reasons why we see successful organizations not reach the pinnacle of success, is because they've labeled themselves. They've said, ultimately, this is what I can do. Even with, the whole, I'm only a single location, they only work with multi-practice. I come back to that because I do have that conversation often. And I always say, well, if you don't want to grow, well, maybe you want to scale back your time. I think most people get so caught up in, I don't want to grow anymore. Like I've grown enough. How can you guys help me? Because you guys seem like you're just growth. Well, yes, we're going to push you to grow because you can go impact more people. But if you're a single location and you're working 5 days a week, maybe your goal is to get scaled back to be a couple days a week. But the only way that we're going to get you to a couple days a week is if we grow the practice. We have to grow revenues ultimately to replace it so you can make the same income. If we don't do that, you're going to be in trouble. And that's why, a lot of people get so caught up in, I make a lot of money, but I also work 5 days a week. Now I want to scale back, but I don't want to grow anymore. Well, does that really make sense? Like,
and what is growth? I mean, I was working with somebody recently, and we were just doubling the average revenue of patient base. Actually, it's probably going to be closer to triple, because not wanting to expand to another location, but also wanting to pull back. So there's a strategy behind that too. Ultimately, how do we change out patient base, and then how do we bring in the right procedures, and then how do we still scale that? Because I still think you've got to be able to scale that. I mean, I have a doctor that produces an amount so much a month. It's just insane, $300,000 to $500,000. And how do you scale that? Right. But we did, and you can too. So by the way, it's much more harder to scale a producer that's doing 300,000 than it is to scale someone doing 70 grand. So that's the kind of interesting part, is like you become so strong at producing, but you're almost building your own trap. So how do we scale the organization out? And I think that people need to look at their business, and I think that they need to go back, and I think they need to say, and by the way, this could be personal too. By the way, this is the whole, like, I got a thyroid problem. Like, look, okay, maybe your weight is a thyroid problem, or maybe it's the fact that you're also eating McDonald's at the end of the day. Maybe I say that because, look, maybe you're creating stories that aren't true about your own but because, by the way, I do believe everything affects everything else. Take care of your weight, it'll affect your marriage. Take care of your marriage, it'll affect your business. Take care of your business, and on and on. But I do believe that in this life that we're only here for a certain period of time. I believe we've all set limits on the joy we allow ourselves to have, the success we're allowed to have for ourselves, the business that we're entitled to have. And all of us are doing it. That's the interesting part. And the question is, how do you challenge yourself? One of the reasons why I work with multiple coaches, and people are always fascinated by that. Sometimes they're like, you have coaches? I'm like, well, yeah, like all elite athletes do. And so if you're going to be elite, you have to have coaches. I mean, if you think you got it all figured out by yourself, then that's the silliest mistake I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I always love that people are, $3,000 a month or $4,000 a month. I'm like, that should be chicken feed, by the way. If that's not chicken feed, then you really have set some upper limits, right? Because there should be this ability to scale yourself and your income. And this is going back down to abundance and scarcity mindset. It's what would I get from that? How much more could I grow my organization? All these things are really, really powerful. And so, I think we have to challenge ourselves.
I think, that everything affects everything else. That reminded me of, you haven't done it in a while. The Jim Rohn, what was the philosophy? The apple starts with an apple, or
philosophy.
It's as simple as doing what?
Is as simple as apple a day? Yeah. As simple as an apple a day. Well, of course it's an simple as apple a day. Where else would you start but an apple a day?
You haven't done that one in a while.
Yeah, sure. Right? Because if you probably don't eat an apple, probably won't take a walk around the block. Don't take a walk around the block. You probably got a, empty bank account. Have an empty bank account. Probably have a bad marriage, and everything does affect everything else. And look, there is something to that. We were joking about my big giant journal this morning, but my day started with journaling and transferring money and things that set my mindset up for success. The great Jim Rohn would say, I would make use of a journal. So many thoughts and so many things to capture. One of the greatest legacies we can leave for our children is the ability to read your thoughts. And it's not stuff you leave them. It's the wisdom you leave them. Right. I was telling my son recently, I said to him, I've had your IQ tested and you're a smart kid and there's no doubt about that. And you're going to do well in this world. But I said, just because you're smarter than someone doesn't mean that they don't know more. And intellectually, you might have a higher intelligence, but with that said, they might have experience. And so I would stop and listen to them because they might have some experience that's helpful. But one of the greatest things we can leave behind is our experience, things we did well and things we didn't do well, and things to grow and ways to grow. But that's a way, why do I start my day off by journaling? Well, and moving money. Well, the money part is pretty simple. And that's really about growth eats cash. And the journaling part is really about getting the mindset ready for the day, and capturing the day and capturing what you wanted to do well that day and going into intentionality with the right mindset. Well, there's a compound effect that happens of that over time, of being intentional with your day, not letting it go by. Because if you're not careful, a year goes by, 5 years go by, 10 years goes by, and you don't really realize what you've missed. And you missed your kids growing up. You've missed the business. You've missed so many opportunities. I think one of the greatest things you can do is, excuse my French, but grow this son of a bitch so you can get out of the damn business and spend time with your family and go do the things that you want to do in this life and quit wasting them. You and I were having this conversation this weekend and this idea of like, look, man, build the life you want to create. Like, utilize the greatest dental practice is one of the greatest assets ever created. Use it to go capture the moments of your life. Use it to get on a jet. Use it to take your family across the world. Use it to spend more time with your spouse. Use it to get to the gym. Use it to pay for a personal trainer. Use it to pay for coaches. One of the greatest things you do in financial evolution, you brought up, which I talk about, the reinvestment back into yourself and the monetary reward and investment you need to make in yourself. Because you have to invest in yourself to get the return. You want to get rid of your upper limit problems? Spend some money. You're going to have to uncover those things, to uncover. And I have different coaches in different areas in my life, and they're not all business, because I do believe that we have to have someone see our blind spots and that we have to grow. And And so I do believe that, we have to uncover these areas. Plus, we have to spend time with people, build a new, create growth in yourself so that you can create value in circles. So one of the greatest things you can do is show up in circles and provide value, so that you can start changing that circle, so that you can end up changing your upper limit by being around successful people doing successful things. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah. I think ultimately speaking, the upper limit conversation is something that's ever going to be changing, because you should always be getting to a limit and then reestablishing where your limit's going to be. And we talk about all the time, people label themselves. So figure out ways to get around that. I think ultimately speaking, it's going to be, a great end of the year. How do you get to the next level? Like, how do you get past the limit that you currently put on yourself? Sit down, journal, put in place, like, what is limiting me from accomplishing, my biggest goals? And I think it's always, if you don't know what your goals are, it's kind of crazy. I mean, I have conversations all the time where I ask people, what do you look like? What do you want? Ultimately speaking, with your practice, what are you trying to get? And a lot of them have very vague answers or nothing very concrete. I think I've had one or two people been like, this is exactly what I want. Dum, 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 dum. And those people are always the most successful ones, because they know what they're chasing and they know what's been holding them back and how to get to the next level. That's why they're reaching out for help. So if you find yourself in that position, start reading. One of the great books that I mentioned was Financial Evolution. Get it. Read it.
Right.
Figure out what phase you're in.
Someone asked me one time, I don't know what it's cost on Amazon. I have to look it up, but it's probably $20, right?
Yeah.
And let's look at that up. This is kind of interesting. Just chat along. I'll bring it up here, Matthew. Let's look at this investment and see if someone's willing to make this investment. I mean, I have no idea what I charge for it, but there's a reason I say that, because I'm going to bring it up. Let's see. Financial Evolution comes up. Greatest book. No, I'm just kidding. Hold on 1 second. Financial.
I think it's like, I think it's like right around $20.
Evolution. All right. A proven path. All right. $24.99.
Yeah.
So interesting. One time I was told by somebody, and by the way, if you've read Financial Evolution, go make a review. I've had so many people are like, oh, it's the greatest book ever. I'm like, would you write a review? So look, I'm probably the worst about that too, but I want you to think about this for a second. So Financial Evolution, it's not hard. They're almost sold out. It says only 2 left in stock. So if you're going to listen to this podcast, you better go order them quick, because they're going to be sold out for a little bit until they get the next group. But I want you to hear me on this, which is really important, is that $25. Yeah. $25. You probably spent it on Amazon this morning. $25 into your own self-education. And yet, as many times I'll say that, somebody will go, someone told me one time, they were like, you should lower the price point to $19.99. I was like, if somebody's not willing to spend $25, I mean, that's an intriguing title. Transform your life through the 5 stages of wealth. That would intrigue me. I'd want to know what those 5 stages were. And ultimately, what I did was I looked at thousands of people that I've met for financial days, and I grouped them into categories and where they found it. I'd want to know, if I was listening to this podcast, where do I fall and what do I need to do and what changes do I need to make for $25 for something that could ultimately transform my life? But how many people will listen to this podcast and ultimately, and this is not about shaming anybody or I'm holding a mirror up right now. How many will listen to this podcast? You'll go to the red light. Here's what you'll do. You'll go to the red light, because you're going to do it anyhow. I know you are. You go to the red light and you're going to open your phone. You're going to open up Facebook, right? And then someone's going to honk behind you because you're staring at your phone. They're going to get to the next red light. You're going to open your phone again, look at your text messages, and then you're going to try to text before you. Hopefully, you're not doing it while you're driving, and then open the darn phone, go to Amazon, type in a title, and hit buy now. Does that make sense? I mean, and by the way, I don't care. Buy the book, don't buy the book. I don't make my money off the book. I mean, I don't even. It's not. Trust me, I didn't write it to make money, and I'm not really worried about what comes in from it. But I do think that when we look at our lives and upper limit problems, we've got to find ways to transform. And if you're hitting an upper limit in your business, if you're not sure how to get through the next wall, if you're thinking about how do I really scale this thing, get help. Get help to uncover these things, because you have to be able to see them in your own life. Where are you holding yourself back? What have you allowed yourself to be held back by? And what are those things? Look, I guarantee you, the person who has, this is the thing, is when I get to 10 million, when I get to 100 million, look, I guarantee the person at $1 billion is going, how do I get to 5 billion? Right? There's always a next level. But ultimately, I think that you should be able to create the life you want. And I do want to make sure I make the emphasis on this. Utilize your business to create the life you want. Utilize your business as a tool. If your business is Look, if you want to serve your tool, that's why who's right for Tower? Well, look, I mean, ultimately, if you've gotten to a place in your business in your life where you're doing $1.5 million, your life is good. You don't want to grow anymore. You ultimately want to grow maybe by inflation, and you have no desire to scale, and you want to just sell it off to some point to some associate. Tower is not the right fit for you. Let me just freaking no, don't call us, please. We're not the right fit. I'm serious. Like, we're not the right fit. 100% not the right fit. Go, find some group of people who ultimately at the country club want to stay at the same place and play golf on Fridays, work your 4 days, 8 to 5, and be good. Like, we're not the group. Okay. Find somebody who wants to come in and train your team on how to pick up the phone or something. That's fine. But if you want to scale and do awesome, amazing things and take this life and move it and like when you leave this world, if you want people to stand in line to pay homage to the things you've done in this world, if you want to build something impactful with legacy of importance, if you want to like run through the freaking wall to create impact in this world, then yes, then we're the right absolute. And I don't care if you got one location, half a location, no locations, or 27 locations. If you're really trying to do something awesome, that's who should call. The people who have settled and don't want anything more out of life. Do I want to spend the next 5 years trying to get you to wake up inside? Maybe that's somebody else's job, and by the way, I don't discount anyone. You might have the happiest life in the world, by the way, being that person. You'll eventually sell it to a DSO anyhow, now or later, and you'll probably just disappear. Yep. I was very adamant that you guys shouldn't be selling off all your practices off, but you did it anyhow. So those of you who really want to be the future of dentistry, and I'm serious about this, the future of dentistry is independent owned doctors who care about their team, who care about their patients, who care about the future and want to scale nationally. That's you. You're at the right spot.
Philosophy. I love this. I think, we haven't done a philosophy podcast in a little while. I think I had to bring it back a little bit. I think every time we do a foundation workshop, we always come back and we're like, the philosophy is the most important thing that we need to get across because we have to change your mindset.
You got to think about this as people go back and go, I was listening to this podcast and I got some tools on. Look, I mean, you got to get out. It's okay. Top down philosophy is build the leader first.
Yeah.
If you have a top down philosophy, which Tower does, if you have a top down philosophy, you build the leader first. You look at you. If you have a bottom up, you look at your team and go, oh, man, they're all messed up. They're the problem. If it's top down, which is what all great organizations are, you look at you first and say, am I the CEO that this organization needs? Have I put myself in the right position? Am I having the right conversations? Am I doing the things? Am I investing in myself? Because if I'm going to tell my team to invest in themselves, I better be investing in myself. Am I showing up in the right state with the right strategy and the right story? Am I doing those things so that people can look at me as an inspiration and for an example? Am I the one who's going to attract a director of operations who can truly help me scale this organization? Am I the person who's attracting future doctors who could go anywhere and are being offered tremendous amounts by DSOs and others? Are they going to want to follow me? Are they going to want to follow my organization? Are they want to be part of building something great? Or am I just trying to offer them a paycheck?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, go to work on you first. Go to work on who you are. Go build out you. And the rest will follow. That I can promise 100%. If you're not willing to invest $25 in yourself, all you're going to do is leave behind trinkets.
Yep.
But ultimately speaking, the person who wants to invest in themselves will leave behind a legacy, and a legacy is not money. Maybe it has some financial components to it, but look, if you haven't left the right legacy, they won't know how to spend the money anyhow. If you haven't left the right legacy, it won't be directed. If not, then it's just a bunch of stuff. When my father passed in February, we were having a conversation this morning on the way here. I was talking to my brother and my mom. We were all on the phone together, and my mom said, I said, why don't we just get a dumpster? I'll get a dumpster. Cause when my dad left, he left a lot of, we'll call it stuff. And so I said, why don't we get a dumpster? And why don't we put a dumpster in the front yard? And you guys we'll just load it up. Of course they said, no, it's just, and I said, okay, that's fine. I tried. But it was interesting in that moment because, he thought all that stuff mattered. And it's literally, so my mom says this morning, she says, She says, well, my friends tell me it takes about a year to dispose of all the stuff. Like that's how long I should expect. And I'm about 7 months in. And so I've got some more months to deal with the stuff. I'm like, is that crazy? Like you live, right? There's this, you lived life on this earth for a period of time. And the only thing he left was a year of dealing with stuff, right? That's not what, do you want to leave behind a year of dealing with stuff? Or do you want to leave behind your journals? Do you want to leave behind your legacy? Do you want to leave behind your upper limits, which is a much higher level? Do you want to inspire those around you to build a better life? I mean, I'm not trying to be overly, maybe I am. Hell, I'm just trying to reach out to somebody. Some of you turned this podcast off already, but if you're still listening and you're focused on this, like you got to think about this. This is your life. Like the crap is just a bunch of shit that nobody cares about when you leave. But when you build an organization of purpose and intentionality, the amount of people you will impact during the time of having that organization, you will never, ever be able to measure. And when you impact each one of their lives one by one, I'm telling you, that's why you got to journal. You can't walk in half baked, half awake with half a cup of coffee. You got to go in fully leaded and ready to go. So, this podcast, you're right. We haven't talked about philosophy in a while, but it's because the fact that, well, I don't know what it's because of, but today that's where I'm at, Matthew.
That's where today.
And today you need to lean into it because, going back and it's hard, man. It's scary to invest in marketing. It's scary to invest in people. You can raise your hand in your car. You'll look like a silly person, but you can raise your hand if it's been tough to hire great people and tougher to lose them. Raise your hand if it's scary to invest in marketing. Raise your hand if you've been through some emotional hurt because of it. Raise your hand because one of the greatest things I've ever heard is a CEO gets fired more than any single person. Every time a patient leaves, you're fired. Every time a team member leaves, you're fired, and it hurts. But the thing is that when we get to the other side of that, building a great organization is about the ones who have been impacted along the way and building an organization of significance. So it doesn't matter about your $1.4 million. It certainly doesn't matter about your 10 locations. It's why are you building this organization to begin with? Well, Eric, because I want a bunch of money. Why do you want a bunch of money? Well, what are you going to do with it? Leave it to your kids? I tell you what, you don't leave behind discipline. You don't leave behind preaching and education. If you haven't had coaching and you don't know how to lead, they will love that you left behind a whole lot of money. And you know who will love it even more? The kids. They will love being a trust fund baby. But I will tell you right now, I don't think that's the legacy you want.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something bigger to build out there for yourself. But if you don't have a journal, if you don't make use of a journal, where do you keep all these thoughts anyhow? My best thinking is in the shower. Maybe that's because that's uninterrupted time. But where are you going to put these thoughts that when you have them? Where do you capture the thoughts? Where do you capture the greatness? Or do you let it disappear? And who will read it after you're gone? I think that's really important. Anyhow.
And I think, I always close out this podcast with share the message. I think that's, where we're at this point is, you have the ability to share this if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, if you're listening to this on YouTube, you have the ability to just click share and you can share it with some of your friends. I mean, a lot of times we get people that reach out to us and be like, this doctor shared the podcast with me and I thought it was awesome and I'd love to have a conversation. I think, one of the greatest things that you can do is share the message with other people. And that's kind of how I wrap up the podcast now is make sure you always like, subscribe, and share the message with other people, because that's why we do it ultimately. We're trying to help as many people as we can by spreading a message of what they can get accomplished with their business. Because there's a lot of people out there that are putting limited beliefs on you, setting that limitation. You guys are ultimately believing it. So now we got to break through the barrier and make sure we get it accomplished.
This podcast is a gift. It really is. It's a gift to the industry. What I mean by that is that, there's no intentionality of selling advertising to the podcast. We weren't doing this to try to get, now we have so many thousands of listeners, but it was never meant to be, a sales mechanism in entire leadership. It was never, that was not the idea. We really truly wanted to take some time to communicate with the airwaves and communicate with people and give back. And so that's a gift to you. And one of the greatest gifts you can give back to us is to share it with somebody else. Have the conversation. Hey, sit down with them, have a cup of coffee. What are your upper limit problems? What are my upper limit problems? Break that down. Sit down with your spouse or your kids. Try to determine their upper limit problems. And so one of the greatest things you can do is absolutely subscribe, share, go watch on YouTube. Do those things. That would be a huge favor. I mean, and I would ask that as a favor. Just click on it, subscribe, and share.
I like it. This was a long one.
Man, 38 minutes or something. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Long one. Well, thank you as always, Eric, for joining us in the studio. I think this was another great podcast. Listen, guys, if you have any new stuff that you want us to talk about, I know there's a lot of stuff going out in the marketplace. So as always, you can either email info@towerleadership.com, email me directly at matthew@towerleadership.com, or comment on our social media posts when we announce the podcast, and let us know what you guys want us to talk about. We're an open book at this point. So if there's a certain topic you want us to just kind of put our thoughts on, let us know and we'll be happy to do it. So as always, thank you, Eric. Thank you guys for listening. Join in next time.